Welcome back to another Stampede Blue Colts cast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Matt Danley. As always, we are brought to you by Mike Ernest and his Remax Advanced Realty and the Indy Home Pros team, who are the #1 selling real estate team in Indiana. If you guys are looking for a house, looking to sell your house, or wanting to do something in real estate, make sure you guys are getting a hold of Mike Ernest anywhere in the Indianapolis area. Thank you guys and welcome back. Of course, we've got a lot to talk about today. A lot to discuss, a lot to kind of ponder, I suppose you could say. But we've got some news. We've got some camp notes. I mean, a little bit of everything today. I'm going to talk to you guys about who's impressed me, who hasn't. And we're going to kind of go through each position. So kind of settle in for the long haul here. We've got ourselves at least a good 45-minute show, I think. And we'll try not to go too much further over that. But like I said, there's a lot to talk about. We got Jack Mewhort retiring. That to me is kind of a major blow. It sucks. Good for him. Kind of sucks for us in Indiana, Colts, Colts fandom. It's just not a good thing. That he was, if not a starter, which it doesn't appear that he is going to be or was going to be anyways. But he was crucial depth in the interior, in my opinion, and that is a big loss for the Colts. It's a big loss for us because there's not a lot of depth now if you're looking strictly at the left guard position behind Quentin Nelson. Not that we expect that to be a big issue right away, but it's still there and it has to be considered. So like I said, other news, we got Geathers and Hooker back off the PUP list. No issues with them except they haven't come back completely. They did individual drills today in camp. Did a little bit of the team drills and stuff like that. None of the one-on-one, none of the 11-on-11, 7-on-7, none of that stuff. After the individual drills, they were done. And so it was good to see them get out there and get started. But at the same time, they've still got a little bit of working back that they need to do. We're going to have to see tomorrow at practice and then beyond kind of where they're at and where the team or how far the team is pushing them each day. Maybe they'll let them go in one 11-on-11 drill, the initial one tomorrow. Maybe they won't. I don't know. But those guys have a little bit of coming back to do, and they've said that they expect Hooker back in preseason week 3. So that's something. But at the same time, we haven't really heard anything about Geathers, but they are it looks like they're on the same wavelength with him. At the same time, people expect Geathers to come back earlier, I suppose. For whatever reason. So we'll have to see if that's how it ends up working out or not. Man, the Colts released a depth chart, all kinds of good stuff. First of all, let's talk about Costanzo. Costanzo re-aggravated his hamstring. That's not good, and it's not good, okay? Because Frank Reich said today that he expects, Costanzo to be out for a little while. And I'm going to agree with that. And I'm a little surprised because they let him on the field today. Towards the end of practice, we saw him walking down the field on the near side. And if you were there, you saw him, and he looks ginger on that leg. So, he's not walking stiff, but he is trying to keep that leg as straight as possible. And like I said, I'm a little surprised that he was even on the field. That the Colts have been so secretive in the past about stuff like that I was just surprised to see him at all. And then seeing him the way he was walking, it kind of surprised me even more. But Costanzo is going to be out until the regular season. I don't have any doubt in that. They didn't say that. The Colts did not say that. That's my presumption. That's what I expect because he does not look like he's anywhere near ready to come back. And that sucks because he just came back. Colts offensive line just got a clean bill of health. And now we're back in it with the guy who's been the most reliable offensive lineman for the Colts in years, right? Of course, he's the guy that gets dinged up in training camp. So that really sucks because filling in at left tackle, they've had Jamarcus Webb, newly signed. They, kind of tinkered with Denzel Good over there as well. He hasn't come back. He was out today. And I don't remember hearing the injury issue with him, but he was not there today, did not practice, I guess. And so we'll have to see if he's on the field tomorrow and kind of what that does to the offensive line. So we're waiting to see a little bit more of Howard. We're waiting to see a little more of Good, and just all these guys kind of mesh together. Jamarcus Webb has, apparently from what the Colts think that he's done pretty well so far in camp. I can't say that I've noticed him either way, so maybe that's a good thing. But the offensive line, like I said, that's kind of two big hits, in my opinion. Losing Jack Mewhort, crucial depth, if nothing else, for that interior with enough versatility to actually play the tackle position. I'm not saying he would have been a great tackle, but he was definitely versatile enough to play the position. So you lose that as well. Not that the Colts are really in desperate need for that through the preseason. I'm just saying he is a guy that can pretty much play anywhere along that offensive line, and that's a crucial loss. Now, like I said, again, with Costanzo initially coming back from that hamstring after re-aggravating it, now the Colts are still trying to fill a hole on that offensive line. That sucks. But a lot of things coming out good with this offensive line. They look stronger. Matt Slauson kind of in and out today. So he didn't I just don't know if it was maybe kind of a resting day for him. They weren't going to push him through everything. He's 13-year veteran, so he deserves a half day rest. But he's kind of adapted, guys, that mauler mentality, and we haven't had that along the Colts offensive line, especially in the interior, for how many years? I mean, he, Kelly, and Nelson are honestly putting forth this we are going to run you in the ground type of mentality. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I'm really excited about it. He's been playing through the whistle, kind of ruffling some feathers with some of the defenders. But Matt Slauson's no punk, guys. Okay. He may not be a great NFL guard. He may not be an average. He may be an average NFL guard. But at this point, his mentality does a lot to shore up that interior. And I'm excited about that. The Colts desperately need that those bookends at the tackles to be set, though, whether it be Howard and Costanzo and Haig, whoever they're putting in there, because they are rotating guys through that offensive line pretty quickly. They tried Braden Smith a little bit at right tackle. That was kind of a bit, didn't look so hot. Chris Ballard did say we asked him to play tackle. I can't imagine. I can't listen to that show, so I can't tell you exactly what context it was in. But being that Braden Smith was on the depth chart at guard only, I can't imagine they're still considering that. His couple days, 3-4 days, whatever it was at right tackle, were not pretty. I mean, he was not in it. He was turning one time almost as if he was getting ready to pull, and that would be odd for a tackle to be pulling, from that side. I don't know that that's in the offense, but he pulled the wrong way. Even if he was supposed to, he went the wrong way because the play went right, and he turned left into the interior. So that offensive line is still a work in progress, guys, but it is. Light years seems like an exaggeration, but it is considerably further along than we've seen it in recent history. So a good thing for the offensive line. We're seeing some improvement there, and we've got some legitimate hope. So I'm excited to see all of that. Let's kind of go through the depth chart real quick, and we'll talk about a little bit of this. We'll talk about the offense first, and I want to kind of do my best to kind of translate this thing because this is how I believe that it's set up. And I think that Frank Reich kind of confirmed that for us today for the most part without as many words. But the very first spot on here is wide receiver. They've got Ryan Grant and Deion Kane, number 1 and 2 there. Okay. Remember, there's going to be 2 wide receiver lists, and I'm going to go to the other wide receiver right now. The other wide receiver list is T.Y. Hilton, Chester Rogers, then K.J. Brent. Okay. My interpretation of the 2 different wide receiver things, wide receiver listings, things is not a good thing to say on a podcast, is that the wide receiver list over here with T.Y. Hilton and Chester Rogers, that is the X and Z receiver setup, in my opinion. I mean, that only makes sense. The way that they've been setting up through camp the entire time, it only makes sense. X and Y, or X and Z right now, are T.Y. Hilton and Chester Rogers, 1 and 2. And then that slot or third receiver, however they want to consider it, because the receivers have been moving around a lot. Nobody is a slot receiver, and they've kind of have to, the way that the height is in those first 3 guys. But the Ryan Grant list, our receiver list with he and Kane, that's, to me, that tells me that that's their third receiver breakdown. And that comes with cause, I think. And Ryan Grant has not been great. We'll get into a little bit of that later. So I'm curious to see what can happen there, because look, behind Rodgers and Hilton is KJ Brent. He's had a fantastic camp. And Deion Kane, he's had a fantastic camp. So those are your fourth and fifth receivers any way you slice it right now. And I think pretty considerably. I mean, I'm not saying I haven't seen much of anything from Reese Fountain. He had a nice catch and run the other day, but he got smashed and he hasn't been back to practice since. He can't be that high on the depth chart there, but he was drafted, so that's possibly where they put him. But Kason Williams, Dre Anderson, and Krishawn Hogan round out the X and Z portion. And then we've got James Wright, Zach Pascal, Steve Ishmael, and Shontavious Jones. Those are the guys who round out the third receiver or the slot, however you want to slice that. My opinions of these guys are going to be coming up soon, so we'll move on. But that is how I would read the receivers. Okay, now let's go down to the tackle. Costanzo, LaRaven Clark, Tyreek Burwell, no issues with that because it just seems like that's what they've got going. Left guard, Quentin Nelson. Here's the issue with Muhort being gone, okay? Jeremy Vunovich is the backup there at left guard again. That is murder if you're a Colts fan. You can't love that at all. The newly acquired Nick Callender after Jack Muhort's retirement, that's him. He's sitting in 3. The other guard position, Matt Slauson, Braden Smith, Mark Glowinski. Glowinski has not had a bad camp. He's just not doing anything to shine. And he's got a lot of guys in front of him that are better than him. But I think Glowinski has an opportunity to make this roster. Kind of depends on Deshaun Bond, in my opinion. But Joe Haig's still good there throughout this offensive line as well. There's a lot of pieces, okay? Back to the center, Ryan Kelly, Deshaun Bond, Joe Haig's 3 in there in the center snap. So that doesn't mean as much as it does is that Joe Haig is lined up in 2 positions. That pretty much tells you he's going to get a roster spot. Austin Howard at right tackle, Denzel Good, then Joe Haig and Jamarcus Webb. Haig and Webb have both been getting some right tackle snaps, and I think that Webb today took left tackle snaps for Costanzo. So we're seeing some play in here, and that's because Denzel Good was out today at practice. So that's something that, I mean, it makes sense for the most part. There's really no good or bad, set up with that. At tight end, 1 and 2, here's the thing. I don't know how to differentiate between these 2 tight end sets, but there's 2 lists. One has Jack Doyle, Ross Travis, Mo Alley Cox, and the other one has Eric Ebron, Eric Swoop, Darrell Daniels. I think it's pretty safe to say that Mo Alley Cox and Darrell Daniels are the bottom 2 tight ends in this. However you want to slice it, regardless of 1 through 4, those are the 4 guys. Obviously, I think Doyle and Ebron are 1 and 2 at the tight end room. Ross Travis is having a pretty good camp. Eric Swoop's having a pretty good camp. There you go. I mean, nothing too, crazy about that. Very understandably, Andrew Luck is the number 1 quarterback. Brissett, and then Walker is above Kaya, and rightly so. Kaya, guys, I'm going to tell you, Kaya throws one of the most beautiful balls you'll ever see. But once the defense is on the field, he is a mess. He can't throw it accurately. He can't make decisions. He's a real project. I would not count on him being on the Colts past training camp. He may, I don't know. Not on the roster anyways. Obviously, I don't think Phil Walker will be either, but I think Walker will be retained and put on the practice squad. He's just so stinking short, man. He is, but he threw some really nice balls the past few days. He's had a couple of really good practices. Running back, this one's kind of intriguing too. Marlon Mack, Turbin, Nyheim Hines, then Jordan Wilkins, Christine Michael, and Josh Ferguson. Obviously, Ferguson has not been practicing the past several days. Christine Michael can't hold on to the ball, and he can't catch the ball. He's not making the team. Marlon Mack, Robert Turbin, 1 and 2. I mean, that makes, for the most part, that makes sense, right? Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins. I don't really even consider Nyheim Hines at this point a running back, folks. He is going to line up in the backfield. He is going to take some runs, and he's going to, have a pretty good season. He's not going to get a lot of runs, I don't think, because Jordan Wilkins has been running the ball so stinking well. And Hines is a guy that they literally will put anywhere on the field. So I think he is like a weapon. He's a guy who's going to be a running back. He's going to be a tight, or he's going to be a receiver. He's going to be in the slot. He's going to be lined up outside. He's going to be everywhere. He's kind of like the Eric Ebron of running backs in this case, because they are literally going to be all over the formation. So not a whole lot of questions there. Those top 4 running backs are definitely the guys who are in as it stands right now, without question. So we're done with the offense. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk about the defense as well. So give me just a second, and we'll be right back after this. All right, guys, we're back. We're going to talk about the defense now. And this is kind of where it gets interesting as well, because we've got some similar setups that we saw in the offense. Kemoko Turay at 1 defensive end list is number 1. Terrell Basham, number 2. Chris McCain, 3. Okay. Other one is Jabal Sheard, John Simon, Marcus Hunt, Anthony Johnson. This is kind of similar to the way it is. Look, Kemoko Turay has not been at the last 2 practices. He is a sub-package guy right now. I just don't see it any other way. He did get some starting snaps. Believe it was Wednesday and Thursday. Friday, he was out. Saturday, they had a day off. Today, he was out again. So he's not, anyway, it doesn't matter because he's not healthy. And when he comes back, we don't know if is he going to bring that same energy. But he is, in my opinion, not a starter. Today, the ones were Jabal Sheard and Marcus Hunt. Also, John Simon was out today, so that makes sense with them, but not Terrell Basham, right? We're going to start having these conversations pretty soon. Is it time to start worrying about Terrell Basham? I don't know. But similar to the way that I kind of told you guys, it's not a knock on Basham just a few days ago that John Simon was getting the starting reps. Now it's like, okay, somebody else took his spot. Now it's Marcus Hunt. Marcus Hunt is a guy who is piercing through the line. He is a guy who has some explosion. We saw it last year. He's a guy who can wreck a backfield, but he's coming back in from that defensive end spot, whereas he was coming from the interior last year. So it's a little different ballgame for him, but he's still getting starting reps out there at the defensive end. So opposite Jabal Sheard, not Terrell Basham. We're going to have to start talking about that, I think, here pretty soon if that doesn't change. Simon, I believe his was a groin injury, so that's not good for him. He's kind of, I think that he's a little more pivotal than people are giving him credit for, or credit to the defense, because he's a guy who doesn't stop working, and he is a guy who knows the position well. So we'll have to see with that. But that the starters right now, I think even if Turay's there, they're going to put him with the ones, I believe. But I just find that a little premature, given that he was clearly in the first 5-6 practices, to me, he was clearly a sub-package guy that you went in there for nothing but burst and to get after the guys. But Basham, maybe is a guy that they're looking down upon because he's not proving that he's got that burst. I don't know that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the coming days with that. Hopefully Kemoko Turay can get healthy. But let's move on. So let's hit the 2 interior defensive tackle positions. Al Woods, Grover Stewart 1 and 2 at the nose, and Danico Autry, Tyquan Lewis at number 1 and 2 at the under tackle. So we've got Al Woods is a guy who's going to be on early downs. So you want to go past that when you're thinking about who's going to be on the field the most. Grover Stewart, he's played pretty well in the past couple days. We'll get to that. I don't think he's necessarily – he's been a standout the last couple days, but I wouldn't say throughout camp. Danico Autry and Tyquan Lewis, those guys are going to be in there. They've definitely been showing their burst. We've got Hassan Ridgeway behind that, and I have not heard anybody say his name in several days. I haven't. I almost wondered if he was injured. I just haven't noticed him at all. I don't think he's on the cusp of being cut or anything like that necessarily, although it kind of looks like it if you're thinking about the defensive tackles. I just don't know. I'm going to have to pay attention to him a little bit more and see if we can't find out what's going on. But Rakeem Nunes-Roches, he has the speed. I just don't think he's got much of the power. And then Tomosi Lalile and Karan Reed, both pretty silent thus far in camp. So at the will linebacker position, Darius Leonard, Tyrell Adams, Jeremiah George, then William Osai. Leonard and Tyrell Adams have been the two definitely getting the most snaps there. Anthony Walker has been the Mike up to the point where he was injured again. He's going to be out for a few weeks. Sky Moore is getting the first team reps there, guys, and it's interesting. And I'm telling you, and another guy who's getting some reps there. Sky Moore is getting the ones reps, but Zaire Franklin is a guy to watch out for. He's a guy that they're going to be able to use in multiple linebacking situations. They're going to be able to use him in sub packages. They're going to be able to use him in their base. He is a pretty damn good football player. I mean, I really like what Zaire Franklin brings. He's really strong. He's got speed, and he hits. So we've got Thursday game coming up for preseason week 1 against the Seahawks, guys. It's going to be interesting to watch. Just keep an eye out for Franklin. I think you guys are going to appreciate what he brings. And then looking at the Najee Good, and hold on, let me get to Sky Moore too, because he's had a fantastic camp as well. He's a guy who had 14 interceptions through college. He's a guy who's come back and really done a nice job. It wasn't a guy that I thought would necessarily be at the mic. I thought that they could use him late downs at the mic for the coverage in the middle of the field. I wasn't sure he'd get the reps at number 1, even in the base, and he is. Although Zaire Franklin's getting a lot of base reps as well. So that's something that's going to just kind of go, and I think they're testing that right now to see if Sky Moore can hold up in the base reps, to be quite honest with you. Otherwise, I think he could be that late down guy. But he picked off Andrew Luck today, went up with Eric Ebron. Both of them challenged for the ball. Sky Moore tipped it in the air. Sky Moore came down with it afterwards, tipped it to himself and caught it. It was pretty impressive. So he's definitely a guy who, I mean, UDFA too. So he's a guy that's impressing, and he's a guy who's going to make this team without question. Najee Good, Antonio Morrison, then Matthew Adams at the Sam. I think right now you've got Matthew Adams. If we're to pick a practice squad, candidate, I think he's it. He just, I'm not even going to say that I've noticed a whole bunch of good or bad from him. It's just where he's at, and they like the physicality from Antonio Morrison. Doesn't mean he's going to make the roster either, but he brings a lot of physicality, guys. We all know that. He's not fast. He doesn't have good coverage skills. I don't think he's got good coverage instincts, but he is going to turn some people out, and that's what the Colts might want to see on special teams. Just saying. Moving on, the talk of the depth chart in general came from the cornerback position. Here's how I see it. Here's how it played out today for at least half of the day. But this is something that's very much in flux right now, okay? At one cornerback position, we've got Pierre Desir, 1, Quincy Wilson, 2, Robert Jackson, 3, Lashard Durr, 4, okay? So we're going to go Pierre Desir, Quincy Wilson. My opinion is that this cornerback list is for the boundary corners, okay, 1 and 2. 1 and 2 boundary corners there. And then the other cornerback position that's on here listed is the slot or the nickel cornerback. Okay. Kenny Moore has been starting in the on 11s or 11 on 11s. He's been the starter in the slot almost every day. Okay. Today, he also got some number 1 reps opposite Desir as a boundary corner. And then they had Nate Hairston in the slot. So that is something that is getting turned around. This does not mean that Pierre Desir is number 1, Kenny Moore is 2, Nate Hairston's 3, and then all the way down to Quincy Wilson again is 4. That's nonsense. Don't listen to anybody that's saying that, because that's not how it is at all. It's not even close. But the question here is Nate Hairston not going to start in the slot? It doesn't look like it. Is Kenny Moore? I mean, I think Nate Hairston starts in the slot if Kenny Moore wins that number 2 cornerback spot, because right now I think you've got Pierre Desir, who's not a loud a guy who's making a ton of plays. In fact, I think he got beat today by a couple of UDFAs. So I'm not knocking him. Kenny Moore's been really good through the past several days of camp. He deserves to be fighting for that number 2 spot. No questions about that. But Desir has not been fantastic. He's been good. He's not been fantastic. And Quincy Wilson's been a guy who early in the first 4 practices or so, he smacked the ball out of people's hands. I mean, you guys heard this on the podcast before. I wasn't lying about it. He was knocking the ball out of guys' hands. He was forcing fumbles. He was tipping balls. He almost had an interception. I think it was Wednesday, maybe Thursday of last week. So the guy's made some plays the past couple days, though. It does look like Kenny Moore is the guy who is rising, and Quincy Wilson's not moving. Okay. He got beat over the top by KJ Brent for a touchdown, but KJ Brent's had a really, really good camp, guys. Do not be saying that, oh, it was KJ Brent. Let me tell you, we won't be saying that come the season because KJ Brent's going to be a playmaker. He is one of the most crisp route runners in that wide receiver group. He's got speed. He's long. He's exciting. I'm telling you, he's going to be something for the Colts this year, and it is going to be on the roster. He will make the roster for sure. But this cornerback group is a little. I think you could even make an argument that DJ White and Henry Tolliver are ahead of Chris Milton, but Chris Milton is listed ahead of them. Chris Milton was kind of dinged up today. Don't know if that was just him extra stretching or if he felt something tighten up or what the deal was. But Robert Jackson's a guy who's come, in my opinion, to play the past several days. He's made a couple plays, an interception. I believe Durr actually returned an interception off of Christine Michael's chest today, but was just in 7-on-7 drills. Nevertheless, it counts, with what we're talking about. So a lot to be determined left in that cornerback group. It's going to be fun because I think you've got a couple guys in both Desir and Wilson who really have to step up their competitive edge in this. They've got to prove that they are the alphas here because the team, in my opinion, needs Kenny Moore in the slot. And it's not because he's shorter. It's not because Quincy Wilson may or may not be, rising or falling or whatever you want to say about him. It's just because Kenny Moore is perfectly suited for it. He sees his way through. It's a different position, guys. He sees his way through the trash, which is the linebackers, the tight ends, running routes, all that good stuff. When he's in coverage, he gets through that pretty seamlessly. I thought Nate Hairston did a good job of that last year. So I think the Colts are in really good shape when you look at the depth in the nickel spot. They could also use Sky Moore in a big nickel situation. Sky Moore's been the dime linebacker when they've been in that. And so it's interesting to see some of the mixes, and with Clayton Geathers and Malik Hooker making their way back, this is going to be a fun secondary, guys. Don't discount them right now. Okay. They may struggle early. They may have some, a learning curve as a group, but just hold out hope. They'll turn it around. I think they've got a lot of talent there. Speaking of the safeties, Malik Hooker and Clayton Geathers, we said both came back, participated in individual drills today, did not do any of the team stuff when you look at the actual one-on-ones or anything above that. TJ Green was out for a day, came back today. He's looked okay. Chris Cooper's been a guy who's looked okay. Shamarko Thomas is really a physical guy back there. I like Ronald Martin as well. And I think George Odom's been, pretty decent. Matthias Farley has been a guy who you see him around the ball a lot. You see him being active, but I'm just having a hard time deciding whether I think he's had a good camp or a not so good camp. I wouldn't say he's had a bad one, but he's been the one getting the majority of the first team snaps. And I think today it was Chris Cooper it was George Odom who got opposite. No, I take that back again. It was Ronald Martin who got first team reps outside of that. So this secondary is looking pretty interesting without question. So, that's basically the depth chart right now as they've got it. So it's a little hard to read at times, but I think if you listen to what I was telling you about finding the different positions with the cornerbacks, the wide receivers, and so on, I think that you'll understand it a little bit easier because those aren't the same position. You don't put two slot guys at the number 1 and 2 spot at the second corner position. That's not how it works. If it does, they're just trying to confuse us all, and they've definitely confused me if that's the case. So we'll hope for everything to kind of come away around. And sadly to say, one of the guys at the wide receiver position, Krishawn Hogan, one of the guys I was really hyped about, coming back just, 2 or 3 practices now without a brace. He's got some ground to make up without question. They've got him at the bottom of one of the wide receiver positions right now at the X and Z spot. And I hate that because he's had some solid practices, not flashing by any means. And the fact that the thing that's hurting him is that some of the other taller guys that aren't quite as stocky as he is, though, But the taller guys, they're running really good routes and they're getting open and they're getting noticed by the quarterbacks. That means a lot. You can run the best routes in the world, but if you're not getting the ball, you can't prove anything. And right now, those guys are getting the ball, whereas, Hogan's just not getting a ton of looks, in my opinion. So let's kind of talk about these. So let's talk about the offense and defensive guys who, in my opinion, are standing out, who's really got a lot to prove, and, we'll go from there. We'll go standouts, okay? Deion Kane, definitely a standout. The past couple days, Zach Pascal, and past 3 days probably, I would say. Zach Pascal has been really good, super crisp routes. He's done a good job. The Colts are running a lot of square ends out of some of their personnel. Okay, they like it. It's basically an inverted flood when they do this, where that second receiver at the second level breaks in, the top and the bottom receiver in that flood are running to they're on the outside. They're running outside the numbers. But Pascal's had a pretty good past few days. Steve Ishmael had a nice day today. At the other with the rest of them, I think KJ Brent has been the guy who has stood out more than anybody in this wide receiver, group. And that's because T.Y. Hilton is killing this secondary because he knows right where to sit in these cover two, in these zones. I mean, T.Y. Hilton is a guy who is going to kill wide receivers this year because he knows exactly where to be. He and Luck have excellent chemistry right now. Chester Rogers has looked really good. Reese Fountain is a guy who I haven't seen much from. I think I discussed this a little while ago, but Kason Williams, he's getting to that point. He's getting to that spot where he looks really good and then kind of levels out. Doesn't really go down, but just levels out while everybody's either going up or down. And I think that's keeping him on the cusp of everything. Andrew Luck and Jacoby Brissett, two really positive standouts, in my opinion. Brissett has been pretty good. He still doesn't have any touch, though. This dude overdoes his touch when he goes deep, too. Instead of throwing the ball on a line like he does when he's 5 yards away from the running back, he lofts. I mean, he changes his trajectory so over the top that it floats and it dies. He needs to come out and bean it downfield because that's his game. That's what he does. And especially downfield, because when he's inside of 15 yards of the receiver, that receiver better have some gloves on, because Jacoby knows 100 mile an hour and zero. And nevertheless, he's been accurate. He's been pretty accurate. So the quarterbacks have been very good for the Colts. Eric Ebron and Andrew Luck already have really good chemistry. Jack Doyle's been fantastic. Absolutely. Ross Travis is a guy who's coming up. Swoop has been a little quiet, but he's doing the job and he's doing well. And so I think that we should expect that. Standout wise, you just have to go with Ebron, because Ebron's standing out so much with the chemistry that he and Luck have. I'm a little worried about his speed off the line if they line him up outside, because he just doesn't have a bunch of it. It's going to have to be a physical play, and that play is going to be heavily covered with whoever's on him, because he's not getting upfield. He's not breaking these guys out at the line of scrimmage. So that's going to be a pass with a lot of hands involved, and it's going to be crucial for a guy like Ebron, who's had, quote, drop troubles in the past, that he gets that right. So that is something that not bothers me, but that's something that I think the Colts might not want to use a whole lot. You need to use that when they have a lot of cushion on him or something. That with four hands in there and him trying to catch a bullet from Luck inside of 5 yards while lining up outside on the boundary, I don't think it's going to be a very fruitful endeavor going forward. Standouts at the running back position, Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins, for two different reasons. Hines, because of, like I said, he's going to be a weapon. He's lining up everywhere. But Jordan Wilkins, because he is really proving that he's a running back. And I think that he's proving that he's a 3-down running back. Marlon Mack's having a good camp. You see the burst from him, the skill, the speed. You see his vision's getting better. But Jordan Wilkins came into this almost polished, guys. I'm telling you. He sees it. He doesn't really hop step, but he's got some maneuverability in the muck of the offensive and defensive line. So it's really going to be interesting going forward with this running back group. I'm pretty excited about it. And it makes me wonder what the Colts might do at running back, because Christine Michael has had some nice runs, but he cannot hold on to the ball. If he was to come in and sit in as Robert Turbin's, his substitute or something for the first 4 weeks, that's going to be an issue. I don't want that. Colts are going to have a lot of turnovers if that's the case early in the first 4 games of the season. I would prefer that they just use Jordan Wilkins a little more liberally and Marlon Mack, to be quite honest with you, and just deal with what you got, because that is just not okay, in my opinion. And then when you bring Turbin back, maybe you keep an extra guy on defense or something like that, who's a really good special teams guy, or just whatever. And then you deal with that in the roster as it comes later. So standout to me are those 2 guys, both rookies, going to both be exciting. Standouts in the defense. Sorry about hitting the microphone there, if that hurt your ears. But defensive end standouts, still Jabal Sheard. I wouldn't say Marcus Hunt has been a standout for me, but he's definitely a guy who's still busting his ass going forward. And that's the kind of stuff that we like to see from him. Kamoko Toure, because of his burst and his explosion off the line, is a standout feature, though we're seeing him get a little bit closer to the quarterbacks, and he is going to be a weapon as well. He is perfectly suited for this defense, especially on late downs and long. He is going to probably get, I'm going to say, legitimately 5 sacks this year. And I'm only saying that because I think that's low, but I don't want to go 10 sacks and be just a complete homer. So I'm definitely in the conservative part of this argument, but I think Toure is going to be very good this year. He's just not going to get a ton of snaps doing it. Danico Autry, probably the most standout player on the Colts defense. He is in the backfield all the time. He is making Andrew Luck get off his base. He is making him throw on the run, which he did today and threw pretty nice, but Danico Autry would have had him sacked. Make no mistake about that. Danico Autry is an absolute beast. He's a monster, and he's getting through there. He's holding up in the run. Danico Autry is a guy that every Colts fan needs to pay attention to when the season starts, because he is going to be a very vital part there. And when you've got the run stopping ability of Al Woods up front with that, but you've got the explosion of another guy like Tyquan Lewis in there, that defensive line can be very, very dangerous. So it's going to be fun. I'm excited. Definitely Danico Autry. He's been fantastic. And another guy, I'll just say this, a guy who's stood out in the past couple days is Grover Stewart. Grover Stewart has been getting in the backfield similar to that, and he is really kind of showing off his speed and his burst and his explosion. And I mean, he's going to be a guy who gradually gets better, I think, through the season. I'm going to keep my eye on Grover Stewart this year as well, because he was kind of quiet up until then. But I'm excited for what the Colts have up front, to be quite honest with you. I won't say that Darius Leonard has stood out. I won't say really anybody at will has, but the one thing that does stand out about Darius Leonard is his speed and instincts. Okay. Now, when I was watching his tape in college, what I liked most about him is that he could take on a blocker, but he didn't have to overpower the blocker necessarily. He kind of bided his time and waited for that blocker to make a mistake to see where he'd make the running back or the ball carrier, make a decision. And then he would go after him, and he was successful with those tackles. He's not a guy who is in there to overpower people. I haven't seen a bunch of that, only because I think that he hasn't been used that way very often. They are wanting to get him to create some pressure as well. So it's going to be kind of fun to see what he does this year. But man, he is shooting out in the flat to try to disrupt the passing lane, and he is extremely fast in general. So you got the instincts and the speed that everybody wanted from him, and that's what they're going to get. So I don't know what kind of production we're going to see out of him, but we definitely got the traits that Chris Ballard was wanting. That's definitely a positive. Sky Moore, he is standing out. Not only is he getting the mic role, but he is looking good doing it. I mentioned he had an interception today on Luck. He's had some batted balls. He's been a guy who's not afraid to stick his nose in there for the run game. Sky Moore is a guy who has ultimately blasted off since he was, signed by the Colts after the draft. He's going to be a fun one to watch this year. Like I said, not Terrell Adams, but Zaire Franklin is a guy who is going to battle for those snaps with him between the base and the nickel. And it's going to be an exciting. I think those two guys are definitely positives for the linebacking core. Don't be so scared about the linebacking core right now. They've got some talent, youth. Things will come. May not be this year, may not come full circle, but the Colts have a future there. Don't worry. Najee Good. He's been nothing but fantastic as far as I'm concerned. He's the guy who will step up, stuff the run, a guy who can cover. I prefer that he didn't cover a lot, especially anywhere past about 10 yards, but he's got the ability to get back. He's definitely a guy you can tell he's a veteran with his instincts. That has been standing out to me. He seems like a leader right off the jump. And that is probably the best reason for the Colts to have signed him this year. Kenny Moore's obviously stood out lately. Today he had a couple really bad pass interferences where he was trying to cut off the route before the receiver come out of his break, and he just tripped up everybody, and it was a mess. Aside from those two, he has been pretty fantastic in 11-on-11, 7-on-7 drills. I've been impressed with Nate Harrison's ability to go in and out as well. But I really and I'm not saying that Quincy Wilson's had plays, but I still think Quincy Wilson is the premier corner out of this group. And I think that will come to fruition throughout the season. I think he needs the competition. I think that he's a little egotistical, and I'm just saying that on an athleticism level, like an athlete gets that way when they're in season. And I think he's kind of in that mode, but he needs to be accountable for what he's doing. And I agree with that. He absolutely has to be accountable for what he talks. If he's going to talk, he better produce. And the Colts needing to produce. A second-round pick as a corner, you better produce. He's got the length, the speed, the instincts. He's got the smarts for the position. He's got everything. He needs to put it all together and really kind of take off with this, in my opinion. So outside of that, I don't think that I've had really anybody else just jump up, and strike me as being fantastic. But some of those guys are really going to be impressive this year. So I'm excited for that. We're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to go to some of the guys who I've just been not on at all. I'm not seeing anything out of these guys, and we're just going to go through that really quick, and then we're going to get you guys out of here. We're going to move on. So I'll be right back right after this. All right, guys, we are back. Out of the wide receiver group, we're going to talk about some of these guys who are just down the list. And the only couple guys that I can say this about is Reese Fountain, and I'm going to say Drace Anderson, because Anderson had been running some really solid routes, and he just hasn't had it the past couple of days. He had a nice catch the other day. The Colts had to stop an offensive play today because he didn't know where to go. It was either his fault for not knowing where to go, or it was Brad Kai's fault for not getting them lined up right. I think they both got ripped pretty good. Frank Reich was pissed. He had to, like I said, he had to shut down the play, start it over, rehuddle, get yourselves together, that kind of thing. So that didn't look good on him. But otherwise, Anderson had been doing well. He's kind of fallen off as far as I'm concerned. But Ryan Grant is a guy out of this wide receiver class. He and Luck simply do not have the chemistry right now as they're moving on. To me, that's concerning, because that's a guy that you just signed this year to be look, when you don't have elite speed and you don't have that elite jumping ability or athletic ability or another trait, what do you need? You need chemistry with your quarterback. Andrew Luck's a hell of a quarterback. These two don't have it. If he's deep, Luck overshoots him. Grant stutters through his steps as he gets past the defender, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. But outside of 10 yards, they don't see each other on the same level. Some of that square end stuff I was telling you guys about, that they'll run occasionally 10 to 15 yards deep. His route running is not beautiful, okay? And Andrew Luck is overthrowing him or shooting him early or something. So something with the timing, the chemistry somewhere is not working with Ryan Grant. I hope he turns it around. I have been unimpressed with him thus far. I don't want to necessarily put him in the dirt like that. I'm just saying I really want him to show something. I want him to show that he can be a consistent player, and maybe he will be once the games start and they need more time. Maybe that's the case. Just haven't seen it yet, and I hope it rises up pretty soon. Offensive line-wise, guys, I can't tell you that I've seen anybody really completely just turning me off. All these guys are fighting hard, whether they are playing excellent or not. I don't know. The only thing that really stuck me was Braden Smith at right tackle. I was hoping that they would try him out there. They needed it. He needed it, and it made sense. See if you've got something there. They don't. Not with Braden Smith. Not this year anyway. So that is a failed attempt to get it done. I just don't see that happening. Brad Kaya just doesn't got it, guys. I mean, I wish he did. He certainly doesn't. And he, like I said, you won't see a prettier pass, and you won't. It's beautiful coming out. And when it's just him and the receivers and they're running routes, man, he hits them in stride. It's pretty, nice trajectory, down their hands, nice and soft. You get him against a defense, and that ball is going like over the fence. I mean, it's just unreal. He'll throw into triple coverage. He struggles to read the defense terribly, at least that I've seen right now, and plenty of people are commenting about it. Daryl Daniels, you see his lack of speed and really ability to be a game changer in any facet once you see the combination of Ebron, Swoop, Ross Travis, and even Jack Doyle. I thought Daryl Daniels was a little bit quicker than that, but his lack of speed, in my opinion, is kind of going to, send him off the roster this year. I just don't see it. Like Christine Michael, I already told you guys what I haven't, been impressed about him. He can't hang on to the ball and he can't catch. That's not good. But otherwise, Rakeem Nunez-Roches is a guy that I haven't seen anything from, has not stood out. Hassan Ridgeway has not stood out in any way, shape, or form. I would say that Jeremiah George hasn't exactly impressed me this year. He's still a guy who's fighting hard, working hard. You know what I mean? That kind of a guy. But he's not making a bunch of plays. He's not getting noticed. That's for sure. It is when we get to the secondary, Lashard Durr was a guy who was not doing anything. In fact, let me rephrase that. Chris Milton, DJ White, Andre Tolliver, Lashard Durr, and Robert Jackson, none of them were doing anything in the first several practices to stand out. Robert Jackson's come along, looks much better, looks like a guy who's a very fast learner. He is following instruction well, and it shows. I think DJ White had a pretty nice practice the other day. Andre Tolliver is a guy who's been breaking up stuff and has had an interception. I think he's done pretty well. Not impressed with Chris Milton. Lashard Durr still has quite a bit of ways to go. Otherwise, I don't think that there's anybody who's really stood out in the negative for me. Just a few guys there, in the real sense of it, but a couple guys who just still need to still have to prove something. They've still got a lot to prove. So it's going to be fun, interesting to see these next few practices, see what happens in the preseason game, what happens after the preseason game. There's going to be a lot of what ifs, how should they, this is what they need to, all that kind of stuff. But celebrate. It is finally football season, guys. I mean, we are finally in the throes of the NFL season. Even it's preseason. I know. I don't care. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. We are finally going to be able to talk about football instead of what we think about football. I mean, it is going to be fun. I cannot wait. You guys are going to love what you see out of Andrew Luck, at least his build and everything else. They may only throw 10 yards deep. There's no reason necessarily for them to test anything as far as going deep. But Andrew Luck is a guy who likes to throw the ball. If somebody opens up over the top, he's going to throw it. But the Colts have been very cognizant about getting the ball out quick. Quick passes, quick release, quick read, 3-step drops, especially when they've got a defensive team who is going to come at them with everything they've got. Just kind of put a dent in that pass rush a little bit, get them second guessing whether they want to fire out or not. Then you've got something brewing. Andrew Luck is going to be excellent this year. you guys are going to be excited about that. So I think that this defense might surprise some people as well. But the Colts have a lot of weapons. We've got Andrew Luck back. We've got an offensive line that is still, even without Anthony Costanzo, better than last year overall. So that's good. Ryan Kelly, Matt Slauson, Quentin Nelson. Those are three guys. That's a three-headed monster right there, guys. It's brutal and going to be running over defensive tackles this year. Believe it. I'm trying to. I hope that it becomes real, because Nelson's been an absolute killer in practice. And I love Ryan Kelly, and Slauson has brought the thunder. So it's definitely an exciting time for Colts fans to really see what's going on with this football field, or with this football team. It's something that we haven't had in a long time. So it's time to get excited, guys. For right now, that's about all we've got going on. We've got practice tomorrow. We'll continually be putting stuff up. If you guys want to check out that depth chart, it's at Colts.com. It's in an article form. If you go to the depth chart, you're not going to find it. So make sure you guys check that out. And just appreciate you guys. Continue to go to Stampede Blue for all your Indianapolis Colts news and analysis. Make sure you guys, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do that. Give a rating and review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Definitely appreciate that as well. And like I said, guys, we are in the thick of getting this bad boy heated up again. So it is time to get excited, time to make the podcast more exciting. And I think we've got a pretty good guest for you guys coming up in the next few days. Might put a little bit to bed about one of the issues that the Colts have going on right now. So hopefully that'll be the case. But otherwise, thank you guys all for listening or watching, and I'll talk to you next time right here on the Colts Cast.